Early. Hey, folks, you're tuning into the BAMF podcast. I'm your host, Mike Lafferty, and here I am honored to have two shining stars in the RPG industry. Mr. Darrin Drader, how are you doing, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right. And Mr. Owen Casey Stevens, how are you doing, Owen?
Hey, folks. I'm good. I'm doing all right.
So, been interesting times in the RPG world lately.
Good way to put it.
January was a hell of a year.
Yeah.
Indeed, it was. So where are we at now? Just kind of recapitulate for our listeners and viewers. It looks like we've won.
We won-ish.
We won-ish, yeah.
Yes.
If by we, you mean people that care about the OGL and open gaming, as opposed to we three gentlemen on this podcast. Certainly, victories were won. The OGL 5.1 has been released under the Creative Commons. Wizards of the Coast has actively claimed that means that they can't possibly not have it open, that it is impossible for them to de-open it. But then again, that's what they said in 2000 about the open gaming license. And yes, it's a much bigger license. And yes, it has a lot more weight behind it, but that doesn't mean that they would not at some later date try to figure out some way to change it. They decided that they were leaving the OGL alone, but they didn't say they had to, just that they were choosing to. So there is still no permanent safety for the OGL. And there are projects that require the OGL based on where they are now, on 23 years of things going forward, that you can't do without using the OGL or contacting 27 different companies, some of which aren't in business anymore. That said, them not going after the OGL and opening 5.1 to the Creative Commons is a whole lot better than the situation one day before they did that, where they were trying to find yet another way of saying we're changing the deal, pray we don't change it further. So it's certainly a victory of that battle, but a lot of damage has been done that has not been undone by the fact that they've stopped trying to do more damage.
That's a fair summary. How do you think the community has responded to this? It seems like some folks are willing to go back underneath the Wizards banner, but it seems like there's an awful lot of folks who aren't ever going to have that trust again. How do you guys see things?
Well, with Ray of Discordia, this is a Kickstarter I ran, which I haven't quite delivered just yet. But I ran it back in June. And after the whole, once January rolled around and it looked like WotC is going to get rid of the OGL, I made an update saying, hey guys, we're switching to Project Phoenix. And we can talk more about Project Phoenix later. And basically 10% were like, yeah, that's awesome. Screw WotC. And then the other 10% were like, no, give us a refund. And I think that it's kind of the same way as far as the way the community is breaking. I think Wizards of the Coast and D&D has lost 8% of their audience, which could come down to somewhere around 10%. I think that another 10% were never going to go anywhere. And then there's a lot of people who are right there in the middle who were kind of like, this sucks, this is no good, but you did the right thing, so okay, we're still playing D&D. I don't know. What do you think, Owen?
I think you're right in general. I think we'll never know the exact numbers, but I suspect that Wizards of the Coast lost 10% of its current audience permanently. That roughly 1 in 10 people aren't going to buy Wizards of the Coast products anymore, period. Now, some of those people will still be playing D&D and may well buy third-party D&D because what they are currently is WotC haters. Which I don't want to say that as a pejorative. If you have observed the behavior of a corporation, which is an alien entity that is run by an algorithm and a set of paper rules rather than the opinions of individual people, which can constantly change. If you observe the behavior of such an entity and you say, I hate this, that's your call. That's fair. I'm not still telling you not to. I think that 10%, which sounds small, is a huge boon to every other role-playing game company out there, because I think that Wizards of the Coast has more than 10 times the audience of certainly any one other company, and maybe more than 10 times the audience of all the others combined. I'm guessing it's actually somewhere between those two, but that means that a lot of people can double or better their current buying audience by trying to find a way to get these people to buy their stuff instead of. And a lot of people I've talked to who have stores and shops that have had very slow sales over, let's say, the pandemic, have noted that January was a really good month for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Piezo obviously is the huge winner of that, having sold 8 months worth of product in 2 weeks. But Rogue Genius had a really good month of sales. I've talked to a number of other companies that have had really good months of sales. I'll be very interested to see what happens with, for example, Fantasy Age 2nd Edition, which is going to go to pre-orders at the end of this month. So it is a non-OGL, non-WotC fantasy role-playing game that's sort of an alternative to the entire D20 or T20, as Roman Law says, branch of games. And it wasn't released during the height of the kerfuffle. I'll be interested to see if it outperforms what Green Ronin expects it to.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff. I'm a tiny RPG company, and January is one of my best months in recent memory. I don't even have a core rulebook. I'm selling mainly adventures and settings. And, a lot of my Savage World stuff was moving. A lot of my Mutants and Masterminds, a lot of my Icon stuff. So it was, I don't know how much of it was people just saying screw WotC or people wanting, I don't know. But
so it's interesting. Nice. When you're talking about adventures moving, one of the things that can happen is if people picking up a new edition of a game. So if they've gone and bought the Savage Worlds core rulebook, they can immediately think, well, I need an adventure to run this.
Yeah.
So that is the exact moment at which adventures can sell more than normal.
Yep.
Indeed. So
there also could have been the mentality as well that by deauthorizing the OGL, they're hurting the third-party publishers. So people are actually looking for third-party products to pick up to support the publishers who are using the OGL. So that would also make sense.
Yeah, I was hoping it was my charm and my marketing genius that was responsible for it, but perhaps not. So, all right, speaking of third parties, wow, there's a bunch of stuff happening. Where do we want to start? How about we start with something near and dear to all of us, the ORC Alliance. I know I'm a member of this as Fanny Goat Games. Owen, I know you're a member. Darrin, I suspect you're a member, but I don't know for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
And now you guys are both former WotC guys. You are both former Wizards by the Coast, if you will. And
that is true.
So let's.
Although Owen was actually part of RPG R&D while I was part of customer service, I worked with our RPG R&D, and I got to do a bunch of freelancing. But Owen was actually in with the creatives, and I was customer service.
Yeah, sure. But how long were you actually at the company?
4 years.
Right. And I was there for 14 months between getting hired, paid to be moved across the country, and then laid off in the third round of layoffs in 14 months.
And that's exactly what happened to me when I went to work for 38 Studios.
Yeah.
So.
See? We're both WotC people. We have both been employees, and we have both written for them. And the fact that those don't happen to be the exact Venn diagram of overlap for Darrin doesn't. I think it's far more interesting that Darrin Drader considers his career to have started at the Star Wars D20 kickoff party that I was at. Which is a story for a different time, but I think it's a much more interesting similarity. So I think ORC is very important, but we haven't seen it yet. So I have high hopes for ORC. I support the concept of ORC. I support the declared ideals for ORC. I have some idea of what's going on with ORC behind the scenes, but any information I have would be under NDA, so that none of what I am currently saying is based off that. And we'll just have to see. It's like when Wizard of the Coast originally said they were revising the OGL, there were some murmurs of concern, but there was not this huge upcry till the leak because we didn't know what they were doing. I support the ORC Alliance and the concept. Whether I will support a given license or use it, I'll kind of support it regardless because I think alternatives is a good idea. But whether I'll use it or not will depend on what it finally looks like when it comes out.
That is fair. You guys might have insider knowledge. Is there just a huge amount of shots being down at Piezo HQ? Maybe end of the work day every day they go clink glasses and go, thank God our biggest competitor is an idiot. Or is that not happening so much?
So I had some phone calls with Eric Mona, which is funny because the last time I had phone calls with Eric Mona was 2008 when 4th edition was coming, and I was a playtester and I had seen it and he hadn't. And I couldn't tell him about it specifically, but I could answer questions like, do you like it? So Eric and everyone at Piezo has had a rough month. That doesn't mean good things won't come out of it. But listen, putting together a whole new project like the open role-playing creators license, the ORC license, selling out of 8 months worth of product, I mean, that's a great problem to have. But then you got to figure out, well, how do we keep people from being frustrated that we won't have product till April because we're sold out and we didn't expect to be. Doing interviews, looking at the question like, is our entire game line about to involve a lawsuit with a $2 billion company? Those things are stressful. Without having any specific insider knowledge, I guarantee that at least someone at Piezo was drinking more than usual that month, both when all this started and when they revealed that this would not be an imminent death spiral. And, you know, at a recent interview that the executive producer at Wizards of the Coast of D&D had with Three Black Hobbits, he said that they had conversations before the leak, and one of the people he said they had conversations with was Piezo. So it's public knowledge that they knew it was going on prior to, or at least that something was going on prior to the leak. So I suspect they were stressed way before I was stressed.
You know, we were honored to have Lynn Kadega come on the show and talk about the leak. That was some interesting stuff. So ORC is one thing. So many things happening. I'm going to ask you about one I actually didn't know that much about until you brought it up in our chat on Facebook earlier today. Cool Name RPG, which is in addition to being a triumph of branding, is a fantasy RPG by veteran game designers that includes a perpetual, irrevocable, royalty-free license for creators, and it's vanilla scented. Owen and Darrin, what's your take on this?
Owen knows more about it than I do. That's my take. I've been doing my own thing, which I've been trying to avoid the other projects that are doing the same thing at the same time.
Yeah, we should talk about Darrin's here in a moment. And the reason I know more about this is because I am one of the consulting game designers that they plan to have work on it. So I am biased about the Cool Name Goes Here RPG. But the concept is for a professional, experienced RPG crew to put together a RPG that is being paid for by this Kickstarter and by the company putting it together, which will then not be owned or controlled by that company. The plan is that they are literally going to give the whole thing away. It'll be 100% open. There will be no efforts to prevent people from using it for whatever they want. So it's supposed to be a community-owned RPG system. And certainly the fact that 5e is now under the Creative Commons, and 5e is extremely popular, but there are a lot of other popular games, means that there are a bunch of people who are internally and publicly even sometimes asking the question, is this going to be a 5e clone? Is this going to be something different? One of the conversations we recently had was, what are all the things you would like to have rules to be able to do in an RPG beyond stab people? And I went to one of my favorite go-to examples, which is I would like the RPG to have either already have rules that covers this or have a system of rules so simple that it's easy for a GM to figure out to have Rick O'Connell from The Mummy hold off a wave of carnivorous scarabs with a torch. It's an iconic scene, and it happens in a lot of fiction events. And most games really aren't prepared for a swarm of mindless, unthinking creatures to be held at bay with a torch. And one of the reasons that I go to that a lot is I've had it come up more than once in games I run at conventions when I had swarms of scarabs. So I always figure out a way to do it. But it's a thing I would like the game to cover from the beginning. So they're looking for $8,000. They're more than 3/4 of the way there. There are stretch goals that have even bigger name designers like Robin Laws and Ken Haidt. I am one of the people that's currently being considered or is listed who's going to work with it. Matt Forbeck, Monica Marlowe. There are a bunch of names that people will recognize. But the exciting part for me about this project is that it's going to have a whole bunch of designers I know and respect come together to try and build an excellent, flexible, robust system that will then be given away. I do think that the next thing we should talk about is something that Darrin knows more about than I do, which is the Phoenix Project.
And let me get that. I've got that link. All the links we're talking about are going to be in the show notes, so check them out there.
Speak about Project Phoenix. You know a little bit about that too, because you're part of a design group.
I know a little bit about it, but you know more than I do.
Yes. Basically, I wrote the backbone of it, but we've got other people who are definitely working hard to flesh this thing out and adding their input to help design systems that are making it better. So we've got Roderick Weibel, who you might recognize from Twilight Fables and a few other Kickstarters he's done. So he's been mainly working on monsters, but also providing feedback on a lot of things that we're doing. Richard Lorio, who has his own small publishing company, he's been mainly doing equipment, but again, input. And then we have some other people who have, they've helped on spells. We've got one guy who's potentially making a browser-based character builder for us. So we're moving it along. And the whole idea with Project Phoenix is we want something that is legally distinct from 5e that preserves the play style of 5e. So the math is a little bit different under the hood. The terminology is going to be different, but the way things work is pretty similar. So if let's say that you had an adventure that was written for 5e, you could take this over to Project Phoenix, and as long as you understood both systems, as long as you understood the terminology and understood kind of the differences on how they operate under the hood, you would be able to run that 5e adventure under Project Phoenix very easily. And that's been pretty much our primary driving design goal throughout this entire thing. And I wouldn't say it's just 5e with the serial numbers filed off. There are definitely areas where I feel like we looked at the 5e, we looked at 5e as a game and said, we could probably do a little better than that. And so we've made some changes. But the changes are not so large that they would make, the cross compatibility untenable.
And the most exciting thing for me about Project Phoenix, when talking to a general audience, is that as versions of it get closer and closer and more robust, it's available for download right now on DriveThruRPG for free.
Yes.
So if you want to know, way back in 2008, one of the things that drove a lot of people crazy with 4th edition coming out was that if you were to playtester, you did not know how that system worked. So if you're trying to decide, do I want to try to sign up for the GSL and do this big project under 4E, until the game was out, you had no way of knowing. So there's this big gap where you didn't want to use 3.5 anymore, but you did not yet know if you wanted to use 4.0. If you're wondering, is Project Phoenix something that I will be excited to work on or play or run or build on or whatever, it's available right now for you to go look at. And if you get excited about it, you can even contribute to it. Darrin,
actually, it's we are releasing under the Creative Commons as we go. Therefore, if somebody wants to take it right now in its incomplete state, build their own game on it, and release it, run a Kickstarter, monetize the hell out of it, make it their own, they are free to do so. This is very much like the last one we looked at, where this I may be putting this out on Darrin Drader Designs, but it's under the least restricted Creative Commons right now. In other words, I really don't own this, and I don't really intend to monetize it myself. Now, I'm not saying that Rod Weibel or Richard Lorio or even Owen, for that matter, might not come along and take the system and add art and do their own thing with it and monetize it themselves, but I'm not. I'm the lead designer. This thing was my idea, but as far as I'm concerned, this is my gift to the world, and it is going to be released under the ORC, assuming the ORC is to my satisfaction, as soon as that's available.
Right.
And
Darrin, which license are you currently, which Creative Commons are you releasing under?
The least restrictive, that's about it. Let me take a look at the PDF.
Okay.
I think I actually mentioned it there, and if I didn't, I should. CCBY.
Yeah, okay. Dustin Knight notes that he hopes that gets completed, but it's great to know that since it's already out and it's already released under Creative Commons, if for some reason you all walked away tomorrow the framework is there, and someone, if you wanted, as a professional game designer who's been involved in like 11 core rulebooks, if you wanted to create an RPG from scratch, or create an RPG that has a backbone already in place, there's a backbone here that you can use right now, and I think that's already a giant leap ahead, especially for open gaming, especially for people that, like, you know, if you've got an idea for a game and you're thinking, well, I want to run a game where it's dust mites versus pinheads, right? Literally the heads of pins, and that's my game, and the entire universe is one corner of someone's end table near the front door. You might not want to generate an entire game system for that. You just might have a few cute notes you want on, you know, dust mites eating dust, what flakes of the gods falling down on you, it's actually human skin, whatever. That's the sort of thing that I think can be a lot of fun, and a lot of people can do neat stuff with, and new designers can really sink their teeth into something like that and learn how everything's interconnected. But it is so much easier to start with the backbone of something already in place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned these ridiculous concepts for RPGs, because eventually some of them actually do get made. But when I first said, when I was first laying this out as something I want to do, I said, you know what? I don't care if they turn this into the ultimate goat shaming RPG. It's there for them.
Yeah.
I just interviewed some folks, did a Savage World setting called Dust Bunnies later last year.
There you go.
If they get translated into German, that will be Staubation.
Staubation. Everything sounds so metal in German.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. Snowflake.
Schmetterling for butterfly, right.
Yeah. So, all right. So Project Phoenix, check it out. Oh boy, so many projects.
Let's go to Black Flag with Kobold.
Black Flag. I've got that link right up there. 1 second. All right, so this, go ahead, please.
Kobold has their Midgard campaign. They originally started it for Pathfinder First Edition. Then for a while, they're doing both Pathfinder and 5e. I believe they are just doing 5e now. They are doing their own 5e. I'm not prepared to say compatible, but like Darrin said, close enough to 5e that it can do the same sort of thing and will be recognizable how to play it to people that are familiar with 5e. It is playtesting now. They already have some partners like Roll20. This link talks about some of their partners. And, they're going to have their in-house game, which I believe they are planning on releasing under some sort of open license, but I don't, if I've read that, I don't remember the details, so I don't want to promise people that. But the point is that Kobold Press's Midgard will have its own campaign world, and they are playtesting it right now. And I got an email about playtesting it, so if you sign up, they will potentially contact you. You can see all the stuff they're already working with. So
it's interesting to me that all these VTTs jump on here. I wonder if all these folks are thinking the Wizards going to leave them high and dry when they come out with, whatever we're calling 6th edition these days. Go ahead.
That's possible, but also Kobold does a lot of adventures, and adventures draw the attention of virtual tabletops, because that is the number one thing. Having some integrated rules support is one thing, and having maps and adventures ported over to the virtual tabletop is the other thing that really allows a virtual tabletop to link to the fan base of a specific game system beyond just, hey, here's a grid and feel free to draw on it with our virtual crayon.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So that's, I remember it seems like this Black Flag project was one of the first ones announced, right, when everything kind of
so
exploded.
We actually announced Project Phoenix a day or two before Black Flag did.
Cool.
Yeah, Black Flag was clearly is something that they were working on prior to this moment, but they needed some time to figure out, because I'm reasonably sure it was originally going to be released under the OGL. So they had to decide, what are we calling it? How are we announcing it? Who are we talking to? And there were a ton of behind-the-scene conversations with publishers and creators about, I had, as I said, I've been on the phone with multiple people from Piezo. I've talked to a few people from Wizards of the Coast. People from streaming shows, and Mark and Steven from Roll for Combat. There was a lot of talking going on, and I think a lot of people just needed a few days to figure out what they were doing. Darrin was not adapting an existing project. Darrin stood up and said, "This shall not stand," and slammed down his foot, and lo, a game was born. and is still being born. And I it's one of the reasons I wanted to make sure that we highlighted Project Phoenix with early in the show, because I think it's a really cool project, and I think the community should check it out and see if it's something that interests them. And I'm sorry I sound like I'm all stuffed up, but I'm all stuffed up. My apologies.
No worries, no worries. All right, a couple more announcements. Sorry, so many new RPGs. MCDM, you guys mentioned this in our earlier chat. These guys are putting out a new RPG as well as a response to the OGL fuckery.
Yeah, that's Matt Colville for the people that don't.
So I haven't heard an update recently though, because it'd be very easy for them to go with Black Flag, or it'd be very easy for them to stick with fifth edition, given the current state of the OGL. Their main thing is producing a magazine with additional content, kind of like Dragon Magazine used to be. It doesn't make a ton of sense for them to have their own RPG and support it with a magazine like that, unless they plan on doing something to make that RPG go huge. So like I said, I haven't really heard anything new from them since the latest update from WotC, but we'll see. I could be off base and wrong.
They are a perfect example of people that could really benefit from the fact that the Creative Commons now covers the 5.1 D&D SRD. Right.
Absolutely.
That they could just reference that for their magazine and move on. On the other hand, Matt Colville's a GM and he's done a bunch of stuff, and I don't know a single experienced GM that does not, when he looks at any game system, think, yeah, but there's just a few things I want to tweak. Just a couple of little so who knows?
I want to make a game someday called Heartbreakers, which is a competitive game where you compete to create the perfect fantasy RPG among the other PCs.
Yeah, I wanted to make a fantasy RPG called Fantasy Heartbreaker, only to discover someone had beaten me to the punch with Fantasy Heartbreaker.
It's I'm not going to say it's a saturated market, but there's a lot of dudes doing that. So,
just like I was going to make an RPG called Murder Hobos, only to discover someone had beaten me to the punch. So there's already an RPG called Murder Hobos.
Yeah. I got to make a sci-fi RPG called Pew Pew. I guess I beat someone to the punch somewhere. But hey, ENPublishing.
Yeah.
We've had Mike Myler on this show several times. He's a heck of a nice guy. He's one of their main writers. But what are they doing here?
So they already have What's Old is New, which is their house system. They're pushing that further.
Okay.
But they are also they said de-OGLifying Level Up Advanced 5e. That is their 5e compatible, but with some of the stuff that people felt 5e took out that it shouldn't have, put back in. Expanded 5e-esque game. And it already has a lot of its own third-party supporters. There's an entire page of third-party level up support. If you go to a5e.tools, I believe you'll find the third-party support. And there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 other companies already supporting them with stuff. So I think it does a lot for people that want a more option-filled version of 5e. I think it's one of the reasons why it's already popular. I think the fact that they plan to save it from any OGL kerfuffle and have an open version of it is great. And I think the fact that it's already got so many people supporting it as its own subsystem already speaks to how popular it is. Because, there are a lot of people out there that have games that are 5e compatible. That Esper Genesis, or there's a Pulp Adventure one, the name of which I can't remember, that do not then have a whole bunch of other companies supporting that branch of 5e design. So the fact that Level Up already has a number of companies and individuals that are making ongoing professional content for it is one of the reasons why I think it's noteworthy and worth mentioning.
Fair enough. So how do we summarize what happened? I mean, Wizards messed up and they kind of backtracked, and they're probably going to keep their lion's share of the market, but there's been enough people who break away that it's between that and the urge to say, no, you can't do this to us again. So we're seeing just a flurry of creativity and new systems, new options springing up.
Yep.
Honestly, I don't think 5e is going to get dethroned until they come out with 5.5 or whatever it is. In fact, like I said before, I was talking about taking Reign of Discordia and moving that to Project Phoenix. But when they backed off from deauthorizing the OGL, I said, well, okay, we're going to go ahead and go forward with that. You know, I could see doing dual system products, adventures for 5e and support Project Phoenix while I'm at it. But I really think that unless WotC does something to really piss people off again, like they just almost did, I don't think any of these systems are going to get huge, to be honest with you. At this point, Project Phoenix are all kind of like, well, I guess we put a lot of effort into this. We might as well finish it, But I think D&D is going to remain king unless WotC does something to themselves again.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Even 4th edition, which a lot of people want to list as a unsuccessful D&D, it was only unsuccessful based on the numbers that Wizards of the Coast wanted. It was still outselling everyone else.
Right.
Even when there was a perception amongst some people answering the phones in retail stores that maybe Pathfinder was selling better where they were standing, that does not mean that total numbers Pathfinder was outselling 4E. It's absolutely not the case.
I heard that 1/4 Pathfinder actually beat D&D.
So that is according to the ICV2 survey, and those surveys occur by them calling a unknown number of retail stores and asking whoever answers the phone what's selling best. It is 100% not a scientific survey. So while I did not get to see all the numbers at the same time, right? You could go look at the Amazon rankings of Pathfinder 1st edition and 4th edition when people thought 4th edition was outselling it, and it wasn't. It's just that, was it outselling it in individual retail stores? Sure. Were there Pathfinder fans running some of those shops who hated 4th edition because it was not their beloved 3.0 or 3.5? Absolutely. So that was a PR survey more than anything. But it was still selling worse than Wizards of the Coast wanted or a lot of retailers thought it should. And there were a whole bunch of people who walked away from it and never went back to Wizards of the Coast. There are still people who are still playing 1st edition Pathfinder who moved there from 3.5. There are people playing 2nd edition Pathfinder that have moved there from both 5e and 4e and 1st edition Pathfinder. So some fans will be peeled off by this. But I mean, I think even on this show, when we were first talking about this happening, I said, hey, if they go back on this and decide not to do it, then in 6 months, we'll just all be going, hey, remember that time when, and that's where we are now. Most people will forget this was even a thing. Most gamers will just play whatever they want to play. But a tiny fraction of Wizards of the Coast numbers can support an independent creator happily. So I still think there's a good opportunity here.
Yeah, I agree.
I was talking to a friend and acquaintance who works at Wizards of the Coast, and I was asking his point of view on it. He's like, well, it'd be nice if all of you folks would stop publicly shitting on it. It's any time here. And I was like, well, I understand where you're coming from, and there's a lot of hate, but most of what I've seen has been people saying, don't attack the creators. This is coming from corporate management, and
No, all the creators I know who work for Wizards of the Coast are really good people, and none of this is their fault, and they should not be punished for, for what happened. The management, screw them.
Well, and as a company, I've seen a lot of people wish ill to Wizards of the Coast as a whole, and I don't, because there are very few companies that pay TTRPG professionals a real professional living wage that allow you to have a family, buy a house, put away for the future, and have insurance, right? There are a lot of companies that pay you enough that you can cover the bills, but if you're not putting away some of your income for retirement, if you can't buy a house, if you can't have a kid, that is not a professional living wage. And Wizards of the Coast does pay that. And I do not want the people that are great people, brilliant designers, who even when they are only within the framework of making D&D content, which I'm not saying it's a bad thing, it's just a very specific thing, they're still adding new and interesting stuff to the world. So I absolutely want Wizards of the Coast, if it airs, to be corrected. I believe this was an error. I believe the Hadozi, for example, was a serious error, and not only did they fix it, they, for that, changed the process so that absolutely everything they put out goes through multiple rounds of sensitivity readers, which had not previously been the case. It was not that everything went through multiple rounds of it. So I want Wizards of the Coast to be the best company it can be, and I believe if it is that, it can be a force for good. And I think there are a lot of people, including friends of mine, it is already benefiting. So 5e doesn't have to be your kettle of fish. 1D&D doesn't have to be your kettle of fish. I think there are a lot of people that are going to be able to benefit from the split off, but I am certainly not trying to gather a mob of torches and pitchforks to bring down the big corporation just because it dared to do something that I feel was immoral and unethical, and specifically coming from the place of being a bad actor amongst the executives that made and pushed that decision. But they stopped that. So does that mean I instantly trust them or love them? No, but that doesn't mean that they need to be destroyed either. There's great value there.
You know, I feel exactly the same way, and I think that I should also point out something. Me and you are in exactly the same boat, or pretty close to the same boat, because we are both full-time RPG freelancers who do a lot of our work on projects that require the OGL. So I don't know what your January looked like, but I was sitting here going, well, there's a project on hold, there's another one on hold, there's another one on hold. Wow, my first quarter is going to really suck this year because of this. But, you know, once it was all resolved, you know, oh, that project is back and that project is back, you know.
The fact that they stopped when they did, yes, I would rather them not have tried to begin with, but every day that they were threatening to do it, projects were getting canceled, projects were being stopped, people were having to scramble to make money to do rent payments. So the moment that they stopped, which was before they were even done with their survey, I appreciate that they concluded, okay, this is obviously not going to go the way we want it to. We're ending this. Done.
Yep, definitely. And I'm still more than happy to work on 5e products, third-party 5e products, regardless of all this. I still think 5e is a great system.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just weird when you think about, I mean, with the things that they were proposing to do in 1.1, you know, the claiming people's IP, the payments they were going to demand. It's just.
Yes, we expect Piezo to cut us a check for 25% of everything we bring in every month. Now it's going to fly.
Well, over $750,000. But
I'm assuming Piezo fits that bill. I could be wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, well, they definitely do, since it was gross, which I think was the biggest problem, right? That was not net. But, right, they were already talking to Piezo, and I'm sure what they were trying to do was tell Piezo, hey, you guys don't want to sign this, let us make you a custom deal, and we will never know what that custom deal looked like. And I'm sure Piezo was standing there saying, not one red cent. The red of blood before the red of coin.
Oh, yeah.
But
they've got good reason to hate WotC.
Yeah, I don't think they do hate WotC. I really don't. I think some of them are disillusioned. I think some of them don't trust for business reasons. And that's all. This would be the third time that Wizards of the Coast has potentially destroyed the entire business plan of Piezo. Piezo's still here. I think
Piezo wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Wizards of the Coast. It used to be part of Wizards of the Coast.
Yes.
They created Piezo. And then, you know, it's been like seeing the football ever since.
Well, they allowed people who were leaving Piezo or WotC to create Piezo. I think the people that created Piezo need to get credit for having done it without Wizards of the Coast.
Well, okay, yeah, I'll give you that.
But you know, I mean, Green Ronin has Mutants and Masterminds, which was under the OGL, and we're absolutely having to look at, okay, what do we need to do now? And I think all those companies are going to be looking at, okay, they decided not to go over after the OGL now, but it's not a 5.1 SRD that Mutants and Masterminds is built on. So Mutants and Masterminds is still vulnerable to the theory Wizards of the Coast had, in my opinion, in error, that they could shut down OGL 1.0A. So Green Ronin still has to decide, are we going to put out a new version of Mutants and Masterminds? Is it going to be OGL 3? Are we going to build it off some of their SCD. There's a lot of stuff still going on.
Well,
all publishers are ducks at the moment. They may look calm on the surface, but underneath they are all still kicking like crazy.
I'll tell you what. As a tiny publisher myself, who I think we all have a pretty good understanding of the licensing, the way that it stands right now. With D&D being released under the Creative Commons, there is literally nothing stopping somebody from taking everything that they just put under the Creative Commons, attributing it as the license requires, and then re-releasing it under the ORC. So I think what we might end up seeing is all of these publishers are not entirely trusting WotC right now, relicensing all of their stuff under the ORC, assuming ORC is, suitable.
So that will only be possible if ORC allows you to release something under ORC that has other restrictions, which the OGL doesn't. Right, because a attribution Creative Commons license requires the attribution.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't release it. Yeah, I can't release the 5.1 SRD under the OGL because I can't put that restriction on open game content. Whether or not I can release it under the ORC will depend on what the ORC allows.
Right.
So right now, if I've got material that's like if I got material from Sword and Sorcery Studio, which no longer exists, it is under the OGL. There's no legal entity for me to go get permission to reuse their stuff under a Creative Commons. I can only use that under the OGL or totally rewrite it from scratch. I can do that. So there's still a lot of questions. And that's why all publishers are currently ducks and their feet are kicking like crazy underneath. and Mike, we have gone well over time on you.
No worries. We had a bunch of viewers show up in the last few minutes, so I wasn't going to cut anybody off. But
do any of them have questions?
Not at the moment. Everyone's just I see a lot of folks in the counter. Wow, more showing up. So,
wow.
Okay, well, we can talk for a minute.
No.
I mean,
let's keep talking. I have another 20 minutes, easy.
Look at you guys. All right. Well, if you wanted to pivot and just talk about fourth ed M&M, boy, we've talked about that a lot over the last several years in this podcast.
I absolutely do not want to talk about that because I was an employee of Green Ronin until the end of November of last year, and having to try and parse what I am guessing and thinking would make sense and what I know under NDA would be a real headache for me on this much cold medicine. So if you want to do a show on that sometime, I'll happily make sure I am. I'll make sure I'm not sick and don't have to depend on NyQuil. But right now, no.
We can invite Steve Kenson too, but usually I just wind up trying to cajole him into doing Freedom City for icons, and it gets awkward. So, but yeah,
get Alex Thomas on here.
Alex is a great guy. I'd love to have him on. He's a good guy. We had him on talking. He writes novels too. We had him on talking about.
He's also a novel editor. He was recently named by somebody I'd never heard of before, one of the top 26 fiction novel editors. Period.
And he does musical theater. He was in Arsenic and Old Lace last year. Back in Ohio,
and he does actual plays fairly often. So yeah, no, he's young and energetic and extremely talented, and therefore, of course, I hate him. But he's a great guy.
I hear he's a Midwest champion salsa dancer, but I don't know if that's been confirmed. So yeah, interesting times in the OGL. I'm almost disappointed that everything just kind of simmered down the way it did. I was hoping for a full, corporate debacle.
Well,
but
you know what? I'm not.
Yeah, you're a podcaster, Mike. It's great for you for there to be terrible, terrible looming things. Darrin and I need to pay the bills, so no.
Exactly.
Having this thing get settled as much as it has, as fast as it did, was a big blessing for us.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair.
I was starting to come up with some backup plans, but I tell you, those backup plans were not going to be as good as what was already in place.
Oh, hey, Sean Vera. Good to see you, my favorite.
Alex's actual play this Saturday. There you go.
Alex Thomas, he is everywhere.
And the actual play community was really, really upset about some of the podcasting rules. I was on Dinner and a Game with several 5e actual play and podcasters, and they were really interested in knowing the history of the OGL and how it gotten here, because some of them were younger than the OGL is. And two, just enraged that someone would try to put a stop to something like that.
Yeah. I was talking to one old salty RPG writer, and he's like, I've been kind of waiting for this moment because the OGL itself was such a hippy-dippy kind of let's all create games and succeed together sort of thing. I just couldn't wait for American, capitalism to put its, foot on its neck.
Well, come on, let's be honest with it. Let's be honest with ourselves. Ryan Dancy said when they did the OGL, he said the purpose of the OGL was to have all of these third-party publishers support D&D to make D&D the preeminent game system and put all of these other game systems out of business. It was his way of driving people to D&D, supporting the evergreen products like the Player's Handbook, DMG, and the Monster Manual, and getting rid of competition. And so it wasn't as hippy-dippy as you think. And honestly, the support for D&D since the OGL came out has gone down. So third-party publishers are still doing a lot to support D&D and driving people to those evergreen products, which kind of gets back to my question of what exactly is Wizards hoping to accomplish by doing this? Content control, there's ways of doing that don't involve deauthorizing the OGL. They want to screw the competition. They're going to be screwing support for their own game. The reason TSR failed is because they had to do too much support themselves for all of these campaign settings they created, which were in competition with each other. It was unsustainable, whereas smaller companies are able to do that.
That is one possible reason TSR failed. And I've talked to Lisa Stevens about this, and I've talked to the people who've seen the accounting, right? It also does not help that they, for example, decided to print 1 million sets of Dragon dice, despite having never moved that much of a die product ever. Or that since Birthright only sold 30,000 copies, they decided to not continue the line. The reason it only sold 30,000 copies is they only printed 30,000 copies. But they decided that meant sales weren't good enough to continue doing it. So, there's rarely a silver bullet for why. Sometimes there is. I
might have been oversimplifying a little bit, but I have heard from the suits from back then, Dancy, Atkinson, they said that was definitely a problem, having too many settings and having to do too many products to support those settings.
And there are ways around that beyond what they did, but that's not the conversation we're having here today.
Right.
There's a lot about the open game license, which is similar to the general public license, the GNU, right? Which the Linux kernel is under. And one of the reasons I personally think that Wizards of the Coast may have backed off is a lot of people were pointing out, hey, a lot of the very same language is in there. And if the Linux kernel is vulnerable, if someone can go back and shut down by deauthorizing or using some other language like this, there are some much bigger companies than Piezo and Wizards of the Coast that are going to have a say about that in court. Mm-hmm. Right? I don't think Wizards of the Coast wanted to risk going to court and losing.
Yeah, it's once Red Hat, which is now owned by IBM, decides to show up in court, you have trouble.
Exactly.
So interesting times. Let's wrap things up. Owen, final thoughts on the subject?
Go to Darrin first.
Okay. Darrin, Owen is holding action, so he gets the last word.
Okay, I guess I can't hold if he's holding then. No, I think that I'm still a little bit shell shocked from the whole thing, to be honest with you. I as a full-time freelancer, I've got to worry about paying the bills, what I'm going to be doing, 3 months from now, 6 months from now. I think there's still a lot of question as to there's still a lot of people who are looking at what WotC is saying and how they're definitely not saying that they will never deauthorize the OGL, and that still leaves a little bit of uncertainty that I don't feel completely comfortable with. But on the other hand, I think that it's very likely that with the ORC we can actually potentially start moving away from D&D if that becomes necessary. And The fact that it might become necessary is why we're continuing work on Project Phoenix, because, number one, we started it and we've gotten this far, we might as well finish it. But also, we want to have a backup there for people to go to. Either A, they decide they don't want to support WotC anymore, or B, if WotC just decides to take their ball and go home. We want something that's in place and ready, and that people can go to. And we won't be the only ones, and that's fine too. Final thoughts. I certainly don't feel as secure in my career choice as I did last year at this time. But I think we'll weather, and I think we'll manage, and we always kind of do.
Here's my final thought. Wizards of the Coast is in no danger from us as individuals. It is only ever at risk from mass action. There was mass action that was going directly for the bottom line of Wizards of the Coast. And I think mass action, be that a union or formally organized boycotts or a community stepping up and saying, we are so upset that we're going to vote with our dollars. I think that's powerful. And I think the community has seen that power. And I desperately hope that it only uses that power for good. And I think it will, because it took this was one of the biggest mass actions from just gamers I have ever seen. If you want, as an individual, to be promoting diversity and new ideas and people feeling secure in their career choices, go find and support some of the creators you like. If you don't know what creators you like, go look up the book on either Amazon or DriveThru, depending where it is, and find out who is the writer, who is the developer, who is the editor. Editors are undersung and they're brilliant. Mm-hmm. Look up and see if those people do they have a Patreon? Do they have their own company? Do they have a Kickstarter running? Do they have social media? If they've got social media, just going and clicking like and share and a 5-word comment on any post they make, that is a huge boon to people's reach. And that doesn't even cost you money. Individual action can still help, but you need to go out and find the people you care about and support them with your time and your feedback, and if possible, your dollars.
Yep. Second that for sure.
Sounds good. Well, hey, Darrin, Owen, appreciate you guys coming on to talk to me. This has been a fun show. Thanks to all our commenters, and we'll catch you next time on the BAF Podcast.